Hey everyone, welcome to the Industry Show. I'm your host, Nitin Bajaj, and joining me today is the one and only Maharaj, as I like to call him, Mohnish Pabrai. Mohnish, welcome on the show.
Nitin, pleasure to be back. Good to be with you.
Thank you. We're so glad to have you back here. So let's start with the big question. Who is Mohnish?
Um, well, living, breathing human that like everybody else. So there's, you know, we're uh, we're very similar in many ways. I think there's not much difference between different humans on that perspective.
As always, you're too humble, too kind, and I don't know if there is any similarities here, but I do look up to you and the work you do. So let's before we go deeper into what you do, let's play a little game. We call it the underrated, overrated, and it's about different themes that impact us as a community. And we're looking for a one-word response, whether you think it's underrated or overrated. And it's a game. So with that in mind, let's start with stock market valuations.
Overrated,
Okay. What about startup valuations,
overrated,
real estate prices,
overrated,
okay, crypto,
overrated,
NFT?
uh, overrated too.
What about the omniverse or metaverse?
Again, I'm sorry, but overrated.
No, it is what it is. What about cash?
Cash, I'd say underrated,
Okay. And inflation.
overrated.
Okay. And the great resignation.
The Great Resignation, meaning?
Well, people
Oh,
are
yeah,
calling
all these
it.
people. Yeah, yeah. Underrated.
Okay. All right. Well, that was fun. Thanks for playing along. Let's talk about something that's more closer to you. And we can do it one of two different ways. I can ask you about, the business, or I can just ask you something as open-ended as what do you do for a living?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I my my younger daughter, I think when she was
Mhm.
like about 10 years old, someone asked her that question. What does your dad do? And I think she gave the perfect answer. So she said, people give him money. He makes it into more money. He keeps some of the money and gives the rest back to the people who gave him the money. So that's what I do.
That is so cool. And I 100% agree with that. But let's talk about a little more of the size and scale. But what I'm personally interested in is the impact, right? I know you're in the business of making money, uh, so we can talk about the size and scale, but also you're using that money for creating a lot of positive impact. And I would love to hear a little more about that.
Sure. I mean, I think that basically, I think for most of us who end up in a lifetime with more assets than we can consume, which is a great problem to have.
Mhm.
Um, you basically have only two choices. You can either in some way recycle it back to society, or you can pass it on to your gene pool or some combination of the two. And generally speaking, large inheritances to your kids will tend to do more harm than good.
Mhm.
I think Buffett has a quote. He says that you're Jesse Owens' son, the sprinter. He says you shouldn't be allowed to start 100-meter dashes at the 40-meter line. That it's okay to start at the 10-meter line, but not the 40-meter line. I mean, if you ask someone to start a 100-meter dash at a 40-meter line, you're not going to bring out the best in them. And so uh, I was aware, thankfully, very early on that passing on large inheritances to my kids, etc., wasn't going to be as helpful, might even be hurtful. And so when you think of recycling back to society, uh, it's a little bit, it's actually very different from investing, in the sense that in investing we get to pick our spots. I can look at 1,000 stocks and pick two that I like and invest in them. When you're trying to solve societal problems, the things that you have to confront are things like poverty, education, healthcare, environment, climate change, so on. So each of these problems has had trillions of dollars that have been spent against them.
True.
A lot of it not working,
Mhm.
and so they're not easy problems. So you don't get the choices in investing. You're forced to confront tough problems, and so the rules are different. And so one of the reasons I started early, I mean, um, I think Dakshana started about 15 years ago, and we
Mhm.
started thinking about it 16 or 17 years ago, is that I didn't want to start thinking about these problems when I was, in my 80s or
Mhm.
late 70s, because I would not have any energy. And when I started looking at nonprofits that I could support and, help and so on, I was very disappointed. I actually couldn't find any that um, ran the way I think a nonprofit should run, and I did not want to set up a nonprofit. I didn't want to do that. It's a lot of work. Uh, but because of the disappointment, I said, well, I have to at least try, and
Mhm.
maybe I'm, being delusional, but at least I can try and then come back to giving it to somebody else. And so that's what led to the creation of Dakshana, and we stuck to a few core principles,
Mhm.
and I think these principles are very important uh, to have impact in the nonprofit world. And the problem most nonprofits have is, not only do they not follow these principles, they have no idea what they are.
Mhm.
So they're kind of wandering the wilderness. And these are not my principles. I think they're almost universal principles. And so if you don't follow these, if you don't measure outcomes, if you don't care about like social return of invested capital and so on, then you're not going to get optimal results.
Makes sense. Now, if we look at Pabrai Funds, and you have a couple of different entities under which you run your for-profit business, what would you say today is the size and scale of the operations?
Well, this is investing is not a business that requires large teams. So
True.
I have a very small team. We manage like 500 odd million.
Mhm.
Uh, and we basically invest only in publicly traded equities, and sometimes once in a while bonds and such.
And I know you famously refuse to have large teams, and you, I believe, still do a lot of the work yourself. As you said, looking at maybe 1,000 companies and picking maybe one or two. So makes me want to ask you, why do this?
Well, I mean, I do it because I enjoy it,
Mhm.
and I think that I used to in the 1990s I used to run a IT services system
Right.
integration company.
Mhm.
And I had started that company in my bedroom, and it grew to about 170 people. And in the late 90s, I actually lost all interest in the business, and I actually wanted to quit. But there was no one to quit to. I owned the business, and and I went through this testing with these two industrial psychologists in '99, and for the first time, actually, when I was about 34 years old, I got what I would call my owner's manual,
Mhm.
which is they showed me who I was. And one of the things that was very clear is that who I was very different from trying to run this business with all these people, which was basically my job had become an HR herding cats job. And what they basically told me is they said, look, you like to play games, but you like to play very specific kind of games. You don't like to play team sports.
Hmm.
You are more of an individual game player where outcome depends on you and not a team. And you try to play games where you have some edge and you can win.
Mhm.
And at that time, I was just thinking of starting Pabrai Funds in early '99, and I explained to them what I was thinking about. So first of all, they told me to get rid of the business as soon as I could, which I did. I hired a CEO, and then subsequently someone wanted to buy the business, and we moved on. But when I showed them what I was going to do with Pabrai Funds, they said it was perfect. And now it's been like 23 years, and I am still, tap dancing to work every day. It's great.
That is awesome. Now, I'm sure, even with that comes some challenges. So, as a business owner, what's the one big challenge you're facing?
Uh, well, I mean, I think adversity is just part of life.
Mhm.
I think there are no humans who don't encounter adversity, and our our job is to uh, face it, overcome it, and move on. I used to have uh, I overdosed on Stoic philosophy a while back. Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism,
Mhm.
and which basically says that adversity is a blessing, and to face it and overcome it, you actually become better. Which has been my life experience. That each
Mhm.
time I've encountered something which has been difficult, it has made me better. But recently, I ran into the writings of this Rabbi Akiva,
Mhm.
who lived maybe 2,000 years ago. Um, and I actually I had to do a reset on my mental models. So one of the stories about Rabbi Akiva, which really kind of had an impact on me, was that he was a very renowned teacher, and he was the head of this temple and all of that. And these invaders came and they burnt his temple down. And as the temple was burning, he was outside the temple dancing. And so it wasn't that he was, I mean, the Stoic philosophy would be grin and bear it. He wasn't grinning and bearing it, he was rejoicing. And so, in effect, basically, what, the poem by Rudyard Kipling, treat those two imposters alike, the good and the bad, treat those two imposters alike. And so, what Rabbi Akiva was basically saying is everything is transitional, and there'll be good times and there'll be bad times, and the times will change from one to the other. So you don't need to have your mood swings go on with the good and bad times. You can be in a permanent state of light.
Mhm.
And so to me, that was a revelation. Now I don't know if I can practice that, dancing while the temple's burning. But I think it's a tremendous mental model to try to live up to. So I don't actually, when I look at my life and I look at in the past we've all had adversity, uh, but when I look back in the past at the challenges, those very things that were difficult led to a lot of growth.
Mhm.
And so how can you not think of it as a blessing then?
True. True. And I remember having this discussion a few weeks ago with someone we had on the show, where we believe when we look back at our own past, the best that I have performed is when I've been pushed to the corner, when
Mm-hmm.
I had but no option to fight the situation. Uh, whether it was back when I came to this country and had to start pretty much from scratch, or when I was looking at, we had the recession and a few other times. When you look back, you realize that's probably when you did your best.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the flip side of challenges come opportunities. And if you were to pinpoint one that you're most excited about right now, what would that be?
Well, I mean, I think the thing that I think excites me the most is I've been a value investor
Mhm.
for I think now about 28 years. It's been a while,
Mhm.
and I've read a lot, and I've interacted with the best in the world and so on. And I've had certain frameworks and models that I've followed, which have worked pretty well. And one of the models that I ran into recently were these two books I read, which talked about 100 baggers. They talked about stocks that went up 100 times or more.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I've been a value investor for about 28 years, and of course, over that time, I've continuously been a student and learning, and I have a framework. The framework works pretty well, and recently I made changes to the framework. So even after 28 years, it's still
Mhm.
changing and evolving, and I think the change is exciting because there are different ways you can kind of go at investing. One way, which is the way Ben Graham talked about, is you buy a dollar for 40 cents,
Mhm.
assets worth a million for 400,000, for
Mhm.
example. Generally, good things will happen to you if you're able to do that. But the holy grail of investing is not buying a cheap asset and waiting for it to be coming to full price. The holy grail is to buy a pie that is growing
Mhm.
and growing a lot. And if you are able to identify growing pies, then sometimes even a very expensive looking price
Mhm.
can be a terrific bargain. For example, you could have paid even 100 times earnings for Starbucks 20 years ago, and or you could have paid 100 times earnings for Walmart 30 years ago, and
Mhm.
those have been great investments. And typically, a person like me, looking at a Starbucks or a Walmart, even at 40 times earnings, would take a pass. So I can't do that. There's certain wiring I have which I can't change. I can't really uh, pay up for things that look really great. But there are some things about that framework where you can let it ride for longer. So, for example, if I were to invest in a great business and it goes up a lot and it looks optically expensive, you know, I may have bought it at 10 times earnings and it's got great growth, and now it's at 45 times earnings, for example. And
Mhm.
earnings have grown, but it looks fully priced. Um, a few years back, I would look at replacing that with something else. Now, the question I ask myself is the business getting better?
Mhm.
And if the business is getting better, is the moat getting deeper? Is the moat getting wider?
Right.
Then what you can do is you can give it more slack. So you would still sell something if it got egregiously overvalued. But you would tolerate things that were 20, 30, 40% optically overvalued.
True.
Because the idea is that if you can capture the long runways of a few great businesses,
Mhm.
that can actually get you to the promised land. And I used to do that format of investing in the mid to late 90s,
Mhm.
and had done well. But then, things got so crazy and euphoric with the
True.
dot-com bubble. And I thankfully was able to see the bubble before it went on to implode, that I went more towards very non-sexy stocks, and we did really well with that.
True.
But I think in the long run, you're better off investing in great growing pies. Someone like me cannot pay a lot for those pies, but I can learn to hang on to them. And so that's, I would say, what's been exciting recently.
That really plays along well into my next couple of questions. One is, as you look back in the rearview mirror, what is one thing that really stands out where you hit the ball out of the park and you're super proud of it? And then on the other end, something that did not work out as well and maybe became a lesson learned.
Yeah. So actually, this gets to a point which I've been thinking about recently. Um, the interesting thing about life is that it has asymmetries.
Mhm.
Uh, Asymmetries are a really good thing. So, what are asymmetries? The asymmetry is that you embark on something where the upside is huge and the
Mhm.
downside is non-existent or very little. Anytime you have that type of a situation, you need to go for it. And so, for example, one of my mental models has always been that in a week we have 168 hours.
Mhm.
If you're working at a job, typically it's 40 hours. Then you got some commute time and whatever, 60, 70 hours, 80 hours, whatever. But when you look at the whole week, you have at least another 40 hours that
Mhm.
you could put towards something else. And when I was employed as an engineer in my early 20s, what I was doing is that I was interested in starting a business, and so I was not interested in quitting my job and then taking a flyer because that's very high risk. But I could do that on the side. So I remember the first company we put together. There were three of us. I think I was 22 or something, and we met a few times. We had some a software tool one of the guys had built, and we were thinking of putting together a business that would you know market and grow that and that sort of thing. And we met probably for a few months and hacked around with things, and then in the end nothing happened. It fizzled out. I didn't even probably lose $500 with that venture. Okay, and I learned a few things. And then a few years later, about 3 years later, I had another idea, and this time it wasn't a team. I was doing it myself.
Mhm.
And this one, after about 9 months, had traction. And so once I had real clients and I had real cash flows, I quit my job. And so I switched from one path. So again, I mean, the thing is that I would have continued to, keep testing this thing with different ideas being thrown up against the wall till something hit, right? And there was no price to be paid.
True.
And in investing, it is the same way. And I think that, for example, I remember in '94, I was taking a flight back from Heathrow to Chicago, coming back from vacation, looking for something to read. I read a book by Peter Lynch. I had never done investing before, and I loved his book on investing, One Up on Wall Street. And I wanted to explore this area more, right? And I read his second book, and that he was talking about Warren Buffett, and I read Buffett's letters and Berkshire Hathaway. And then it opened up a whole new world that I kept drilling down and reading on while I was running this IT business, right? And then I started on the side to apply some of those lessons, um, which eventually led to me becoming a professional investor and so on
Mhm.
and so forth. So I think the thing is that we have to pay attention to asymmetries. If I look at Pabrai Funds, the total amount of capital that went in to start the business, it'd be less than $1,000. Okay. There have been years where in a single year I've made 70 million in fees, not just in portfolio going up. So it's highly asymmetric, right? And the thing is that I think we have to always keep our eyes peeled on when we see these asymmetries show up. And when these asymmetries show up, the downsides are limited. It's going to take some effort, but you can't really lose anything. You got to go for it. And so and even I would say even in the nonprofit side, with Dakshana, we did really well because we adopted these principles. In nonprofit work, you have to do high risk, high return. In investing, we try to do low risk, high return. But in when you're doing nonprofit, you have to swing for the fences, and you have to be very willing to strike out. And so we found a model that looked good, and we hit hard against that model, and it worked. And if it had not worked, then we would, gather our chips and try again. And you got to keep doing that.
So true. Is there an example of something where you did not take the risk and, kind of look back and say, oh, that's a lesson?
Well, I mean, I think that what has happened is that I'm sure there have been many, many times when I should have acted and I didn't. That probably is a long list. But I also see a number of endeavors where I acted and it didn't work. And in some cases, there was a meaningful price to be paid when it didn't work. It wasn't, zero. It was meaningful. But in looking back, that led to a lot of growth. So I just don't see a real downside. We obviously want to take these swings where the downside is very limited. But sometimes we take these swings, like for example, I think in 2014, I had this bright idea, which I know now is very dumb, of starting an insurance company. And I raised about 150 million of capital. And I bought a insurance company in Louisiana, doing workers' comp insurance. And almost just a few weeks after I bought the business, I realized it was a mistake. And I realized it wasn't going to work. And I obviously was unhappy with and think, how dumb can you be? But then I said, we have to put the toothpaste back in the tube. No matter how hard it is to put toothpaste back in the tube. Have you ever tried to do that, Nitin? It doesn't go back the same way it comes in. Yeah. But I focused on that. So I said, what I want to do is I want to reverse everything. I want to get rid of the insurance company, get the money back, and send it back to the investors and just finish it off. And that process is been going on for 7 years. Most of the toothpaste has gone back in the tube. The company got sold and all of that. And the investors will get all their money back, which is great. Wow. But it was not so easy. It took effort. But I knew that if I had not acted to reverse, then it would just be a downward spiral. It would just keep getting worse. So there was pain. We took the pain. We're still taking the pain. But it doesn't feel like pain anymore. It feels just fine. I think maybe like Rabbi Akiva, we are dancing at this point, so it's okay.
Well, that's some amazing perspective to have, and an experience to learn from, which brings me to my favorite part of the show. We call this the one-line life lessons. We'd love to hear, and you sprinkled a few of those in the past few minutes, but would love to hear a few more of your one-line life lessons.
Yeah, so I would say that some of the I really call them mental models as opposed to life lessons, I think. And when you overlay these mental models, one on top of the other, you get what Charlie Munger would call Lollapalooza effects. 1 + 1 becomes 11. So you really get some spectacular things. The other thing is that none of us is smart enough to figure everything out. If we do well, it's because we stand on the shoulders of giants. There have been many giants that have come before us. I actually don't think I have any new ideas. I just have I have collected ideas from others. And so one of the ideas, which I think, one of the mental models, which I think has served me really well, is the model on cloning.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something weird about humans. I still haven't figured it out. I've been a student of cloning for more than 35 years. And
Mm-hmm.
I've seen how powerful cloning is as a model. So we don't need to come up with the great idea. The great ideas are already there. We can pick it up and intensely follow it. If you look at a company like Microsoft, it has never come up with anything ever on its own. Most of it has been stolen
Mm-hmm.
or copied or bought from somewhere else. So even Windows was taken from the Mac, and Word from WordPerfect, and Excel from Lotus, and Bing from Google, and on and on. And they're one of the most valuable businesses on the planet. Same with Sam Walton at Walmart. Walmart never came up with anything new. They copied their model from Sears and Kmart, both of which failed, but Walmart is still with us. So cloning is a very powerful model where I found Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. I saw their model. I just had to adopt it. I didn't have to figure much out. I just could pick it up. So I would say that there is something quirky in the human psyche which looks down on cloning. We kind of think of it like copying. And that's the wrong model. I think we've got to pick up the ideas no matter where they've come from and take it. So cloning is a very important idea. I talked about asymmetry. Another way to
Mm-hmm.
talk about asymmetry is heads I win, tails I don't lose much, right? And in investing and in life, we always want to make bets where the downside is muted and the upside is huge. And periodically, the market serves up these kinds of opportunities to us. And so when we see this asymmetric upside downside, we have to act on those. So and asymmetry comes up in many different forms. I told you it can come up when you're working somewhere and you want to start a business. You have asymmetry in the outcomes. It can come up when I'm looking at an investment. It can come up in many, many different areas. It can even come up in things like dating apps. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so for example, if we were looking for a life partner, or a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever. Uh, the dating apps make it really easy. Okay, now if you find someone incredible to spend your life with, what would you be willing to do to get there? You'd be willing to do a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But the dating apps are very easy for you to meet 20, 40, 50 people. And if you had some filtering mechanism and you went on 50 dates, you would find the most amazing person and you'd ride off into the sunset. It's asymmetric.
Mm-hmm.
The dating apps do for us what we couldn't do before the internet. It will be much harder. So I think the thing is that these asymmetries show up all over the place, and we just have to look for them. Another model which is really important is the default to use with all humans is complete trust. So if you're dealing with someone new, okay, let's say I need a plumber for my house and I call a plumber. I'm not going to have any reservations about completely trusting the plumber. I will wait till the plumber screws me over.
Mm-hmm.
And if he screws me over, I will never use that plumber again,
True.
right? So it's kind of like you're innocent until proven guilty. So the world doesn't run on contracts. It runs on trust.
True.
And when you have what I would call this seamless web of deserved trust, it's the word Charlie Munger uses,
Mm-hmm.
your life becomes really good. So if you have a team with full trust, all the people around you fully trusted, your life's going to be really good. And basically, don't start off with being a skeptic. Start off with lowering your guard and saying you are completely trusted. So that gives you another edge in life, which is, you know, the another mental model, which has been really very important and very useful, is hang out with people who are better than you. So there's a gravitational pull. If we hang out with people who are better than us, we will become better. If we hang out with people worse than us, we will become worse. And so you have to be what I would call a harsh grader. So, for example, if I go to lunch with someone, right, I ask myself after the lunch, was that a mind blowing experience? Did I really enjoy that? If I didn't really enjoy that a lot, I will never do it again. My dad used to say, to have a great life, you need one good wife and one good friend. So we don't need large volumes of humans in our network. We need a very high quality set of humans in our network. Even if that number is 3 humans, it's enough. So don't try to chase large groups of great people. They don't exist. You're going to be disappointed if you start looking for large groups of great people. But when you find someone who's a kindred spirit, who you can look up to, who you can learn from, and who you enjoy mutually spending time with, that's unbelievable. I mean, when I moved to Austin, I've been here about 3 months. What I did is I like to just spend time with myself. I'm very happy, not meeting a lot of people. But what I did is I lowered the bar to meeting people. And so I said, I'm not going to be that picky or selective. I just want to see, because what I was looking for is, if you remember that M. Night Shyamalan movie, Unbreakable.
Yeah.
He's in this quest to find these unusual people, right? So he was doing crazy things to find these people who are unbreakable. My take is that if I widen the funnel, it is more likely that I may find someone amazing. Now, every meeting I've had so far has mostly not been repeated because they weren't what I was looking for. And that's fine. But again, it's asymmetric. What's the downside? There's no downside. The tea is still good. The food is still good. Life is great. Rabbi Akiva, you're still dancing. It's okay. You're just not going to have that same dance with the same person again. That's all. So these are some lessons I would say. And the other thing I would say is that when you have a passion for something, whatever it is, go all in. Don't listen to the naysayers and this. I remember I used to be an engineer and I was taking a downward promotion, actually a demotion, going into marketing. And my engineer friend used to say to me, "Oh, you're like, this is ridiculous." But I was interested in doing that. It was the right move. And so I didn't do it. It didn't look like I was furthering my career, but I was doing what I was thrilled about. So I would say pursuit of passion with high intensity is really important. And then I would say the other thing is that to conduct all your affairs with the highest levels of integrity. So what you want, the most precious commodity you have is people having complete trust in you. And of course, there are some people like me who just give you default trust, right? Most humans don't quite function that way, but you have to earn their trust. And the only way to earn the trust is with a track record. And so I think living your life in a manner where integrity over all else is really important.
Mohnish, thank you so much for sharing those valuable mental models, or what we call the one-line life lessons. Extremely helpful. And thank you for dancing with us again. We really
All right,
appreciate
it was fun. It was great, and look forward to the next one.